now, and I'd like to keep it the way it is. And we can add Nick if you want on the second reading tomorrow. And we got any other questions? Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is Commission General Regulation 371. Mark Warren.
Chairman Land, fellow commissioners, for the record, Mark Warren, Chief of Fisheries. The proposed regulation would remove an artificial lure-only regulation for Crittenden Reservoir, limit method of take at Smith Creek Reservoir to only artificial lures with single barbless hooks, and limit method of take at Dacey Reservoir to artificial lures only. Crittenden Reservoir is a reservoir in Elko County. I fished there for years. It's a trophy water. It's on private land. The landowner decided that he was going to close it off to the public and only leave it open for pay-to-fish people, which he's done for the last several years. And so just to clean up the regulations, we thought we'd take that off our restricted take regulation. Smith Creek Reservoir is east of Fallon. It's on a ranch. The dam itself is on private property. Approximately 80% of the reservoir is on private property. When it was inundated, they found out it was the south side, and a little bit of the bay was on BLM land. This allowed the general public to come in and fish. The ranch owner has had problems with the public for the last couple of years. It's got rather contentious. They've had the local sheriffs out. They've had wardens come out there and try to resolve some of the problems. The people come down on a road that comes down on the other side of the ranch, and they fish. Theoretically, they're supposed to stay on the BLM part, which is not marked. Of course, it's in open water, and they go to all parts of the reservoir to fish, which has caused the rancher owner to tell them to leave. It's led to some conflict between the anglers and the ranch owner. This spring, we went out and met with the owners and discussed this regulation, which he was willing to compromise and allow the one fish limit and the artificial lures. Dacey Reservoir is part of a complex that we manage in one of our wildlife management areas, Kirch. For years, there's been interest in the southern region to create a trophy fishery there. The best way we can do that is to limit the take to artificial lures. The Dacey is rather a small reservoir on the side. There's 3 other reservoirs that are fished heavily by the public, a lot of them from Las Vegas. Those regulations will remain the same. Our intent would be to create a trophy trout fishery and allow the bass take to remain the same. We didn't put a single barbless hook on because a lot of people do fish for bass and use different types of lures, so that would kind of restrict them. So that's our proposal.
Okay. And what was the reasoning behind one fish limit and artificial lures, and that means he went along with that, the landowner? What was the reasoning behind that?
He just felt that would restrict the number of people. It would limit the number of people possibly that would come out there and fish, and limit the amount of fish they would take out of the reservoir. It's kind of his reservoir, but it is on BLM land, so that's where the conflict kind of came up, and he just wanted to limit the fishing there. since it is on BLM land, then of course, that part is open to the public. Following this conflict several years ago, the reservoir was drained and all the fish, perished that were in the reservoir. So that's something that could come up again. The reservoir is presently, I was out there several months ago, and it's about 2/3 full, so it's filling up again. It has a stream that feeds it that has trout in it that can come down into the reservoir. He also has a business of rearing trout there at the ranch, so the water from the reservoir goes down and goes down through his private holdings where he does rear trout.
Mr. Chairman, this is our attempt to try to find a compromise. 80% of the reservoir is on his private property. It's a pay-as-you-go operation. He does have a hatchery as well, so those are his trout that he planted in there. Is that correct?
That's right.
So the people come around the backside, get on the BLM, and once they hit the water, they figure they can just go anywhere they want. And so then there's conflicts between his guided clients and the public, and fisticuffs and yelling and screaming. So his solution to that is pull the boards, drain the reservoir, and eliminate the potential fishery. We felt that trying to find some middle ground where we could still provide some access, they still could take a fish, provide some artificial lure, be able to provide that recreational opportunity without him feeling his need to protect his private property rights and protect his fish resource that he's paying for. So that's how we came to this compromise at this point.
You feel comfortable that, once you take an inch, won't take a mile, that he'll go along with this and keep it open then?
Well, we can only hope. I mean, he's still in control of the reservoir, but
Right.
I think the staff has done a good job of meeting with him and talking these things through. We've looked at potential other solutions, like maybe an easement where we'd pay to provide public access to lighten that that conflict, if you will. But I feel pretty comfortable. They seem to be really upstanding people, and that I think this is the compromise that he.
Yeah, we went out there, law enforcement, several fisheries people, himself, the Hendricks, his ranch manager, and we went up and looked at the reservoir and, walked around and kicked rocks and talked about it, and then went back down the ranch and talked about it some more, and he seems, this is something, we went back and forth on the times that it would be open, and just talked about several issues. He doesn't want people up on the dam. Of course, there's a sign there that says private property just because of any problems with the dam. But he seemed, we worked back and forth, and this is the agreement we came up with that he said he would support.
Okay, thank you. Any, Commissioner Cavan?
Still not open. This is a first step.
I didn't see
It,
He has not opened the reservoir yet. This is a first step to maybe getting to that point.
yeah, the reservoir, the BLM part would still be open.
But his private portion is not.
Right, his private portion, as far as he's concerned, I mean, people come up and they have pontoon boats, whatnot, they kick across the reservoir, they get out, and he comes up and tells them you're on private property. And, there's sometimes they say, okay, and then sometimes there's some conflict. So this would be the first step into opening up the rest of that reservoir. Right now, to be legal, you'd have to, you come down on the BLM portion, and then there's a very small section of, real small, of the reservoir that you could actually fish along, and you couldn't fish out in the middle of the reservoir. So this would be the first step into, as far as he's concerned, opening it up to the public on his private land.
Commissioner Cavan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At what level in the reservoir does it end up being completely on private land, Mark? Is it, you said it's 2/3 full now, is it still accessible to the
I would,
public on that
just
BLM land?
as a guess, Commissioner Cavan, I would, without looking at a topo map or a hydro map, I would say when it's probably 2/3 down, then it's all his property and you couldn't access it.
Of course, from his perspective, he's paying for the fish rearing and all the fish that are in there, and so that's going out the other end with the public. So
You don't put any in?
No, not.
We don't
Commissioner
stop
Rain?
it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would think that Mr. Hendricks, being a wholesaler of fishing gear throughout the state would probably, you would think that would be a very good thing for his business to have more fishing. But glad there's some kind of agreement here. I understand this is also somewhat of the reason, a similar situation, different people, is the reason why Tonkin Springs Reservoir is still under the artificial lures only, as my understanding. I'd asked a question about that before, if those conditions were still there.
And
If you
we
could address
replied.
that.
Yeah, we replied, right, Scott? We emailed you back on that with an answer on Tonkin?
I never saw that.
Huh. Okay.
Uh-oh.
All right.
I
But
missed
yeah,
that.
you, at the Lovelock meeting, you asked me that question, and with John Elliott, our regional supervisor in Elko, we got together, and then we emailed you a response, and then you replied back and said that you received it. And so, anyway, it was passed, that was supported by the Eureka County Board. It's a similar situation. It was a rancher there that wanted to limit the amount of anglers, the reservoir being partly owned privately and partly public, and it's almost the same situation. Felt that was a good compromise, and passed by the Eureka County Board, and then passed by us.
Yeah, and that happened a number of years ago, but it's been addressed and talked to him again in more recent times.
Yes, John Elliott, like I said, our regional supervisor in Elko has met with him within the last couple months, and he felt that with the litter issue and just the whole issue of people coming out there, he was happy with the way it was going.
And one thing on that particular location, I know I've had, just 'cause it's somewhere near where I'm at, I do have people question all the time. It's not very well, there's issue with signage in some of these areas. And, you know, in places where we do have these regulations, I just ask that, you know, do the best possibly can on signage. Because I know there's people come in, you know, buying power bait to go out and go fishing at Tonkin. You know, that's his job, but I try to, you know, and, well, I've never seen a sign, and it's very innocent, a lot of very innocent things, so work on signage. And I know that some of the places that, for instance, have chub and whatnot, that NDOW does not want to have in the waters, lots of times, I brought this up before, perhaps, you know, signage is good, because a lot of people, they don't know that that NDOW would prefer to not have them, return them to the water. And that might be a good way to remove at least some portion of those unwanted fish. Just a request. Thank you.
Yeah, we try to sign everywhere we can. I mean, even on the Truckee River, keeps the law enforcement guys working. But yeah, they're fishing the trophy section with bait, you know, with worms, and we find worm cans and whatnot, and they go up there as you know, often as they can. And we have signed, you know, areas, but we could surely check on those signs of Tonkin.
Any questions from the public on this? I'll turn it over to public comment.
Okay, I just wanted to add one thing, if I could.
Go ahead,
Commissioner.
Mark.
As far as responses go, there was 2 counties that didn't have county game board meetings, apparently Nye and Esmeralda. And of course, we all know we have 17 counties, so that leaves 15. And from the 15, we received 8 responses. 7 of them supported this, and 1, Churchill, did not. They wanted to leave it as a 5-fish limit, so just so you know that. I don't think they're here, but they didn't support it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, turn it over to
Mr. Chairman?
public comment.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, excuse me. Commissioner
I'd like to
Howell.
address Dacey Reservoir, if I could.
Oh, sure, sorry.
Dacey Reservoir, you spoke about the bass fishermen up there.
Uh-huh.
And presently, you can't fish for bass up there now until August 16th.
Right.
And you're going to open it year-round now? Or-
We are. That's actually will be presented to the commission at a later date in December. That was kind of an afterthought. It's actually a wildlife management area regulation, and we worked through the Habitat Bureau and got that changed. So there'll be 2 other regulations coming down the pike. In December, one will be to open it up year-round. We'll buoy it off, and so the people are excluded from the upper end where the waterfowl nesting takes place. And the second one has to do with boating. It'll be unique in that only boats without motors will be allowed the first part of the year until August 15th, and from August 16th on, you can have an electric motor. And that's again to protect the waterfowl. But those will be presented to the commission later. We didn't get them back from the Legislative Council Bureau in time.
I was up there a couple of weeks ago, and I only got to speak to 5 different fishermen. That's all there was out there. And they were all in agreement to go to single barbless hooks if you were going to make it a trophy fishery, because otherwise you're going to see a lot of dead trout.
Yeah, and, I'm a fly fisherman, so I would, that would be mine, but we also try to not exclude the bass fishermen, but that's that's...
They're used to not fishing there anyway until August.
Yeah, yeah, and statistically, fewer fish are harmed with a single barbless hook, of course, than with a treble hook. But we did this at Hinkson, where we allowed treble hooks because of the bass fishing and the popularity of that, so we tried to, compromise a little bit and allow both, but that's something that you could change as a commission.
It would seem to me, to make it a trophy lake, you want to save as many trout as you can so they can grow.
That's exactly right. Yeah, there's been a lot of studies, and even with single barbless hooks, there's about a 5% mortality. So once in a while they get hooked through the brain or through the gills or something. So even in the best of times, you do lose some fish. And of course, with a treble hook, it would be more.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll turn it over to the public now. Any public comment on this item?
Gil Yana, Carson Advisory Board. I'd like to add a little bit more to the story about the Hendricks Ranch and Smith Creek. Several years ago, I had the pleasure of being able to fish out there, the Trophy Pond and the area behind the dam. And I also I knew Dwayne, the ranch manager, because he was on the Governor Sage Grouse conservation team with me, and I've been out there and seen some of the things that they've done to preserve the habitat and increase the population of the sage grouse. And I came back and I talked to Deputy Director Haskins about the issue that he's very vehement about at that time. This was several years ago. Because as you said, he took us through and showed us his breeding operation and all the effort that he puts in. And the thing that he was most upset about was that people coming in through that BLM area, getting onto the lake and pulling out some 18 to 20 pound trout, 5 or 6, 4 or 5 of them, and he says to me, they can't eat that much trout. And he says, I don't mind people coming in here. I enjoy people coming in here to fish. But when they make pigs of themselves, I'm getting upset. And that's when this thing kind of hit a crescendo, and he pulled the plug. And I'm really personally, I'm really happy to see that the department hasn't given up on this and made the attempt, and definitely has been able to come to a meeting of the minds with the Hendricks family, because it's a great place. If you haven't been there, I strongly suggest you go and fish there. It's, when you get a 5 or a 10 pound trout on your line, you talk about exhilaration. That's it. And to be able to share this and to keep it, I mean, one of those is a day's effort. And it's really great, and we at the Carson Advisory Board, who a number of people on the board have been able to get out and fish at Smith Creek, are very happy to see this step taken by both the department and the Hendricks family, and we're all in favor of supporting this issue, and hope you do too.
Thank you.
Paul Dixon, Clark County. What I'd like to say for the Dacey reservoirs, when we talked about that, I'd like to thank Mark and Endow for doing something that Southern Nevada's been trying to get for a long time, which is the establishment of a potential trophy waters. And Paul Harris on my board was instrumental working with Mark and others in Endow to make that happen. And I just wanted to thank Endow for really working with us, because when we first started to talk about this, I think Paul was told, look, this has been tried several times before in Southern Nevada, just go away, it isn't going to happen. And you guys did the extraordinary thing, and I just wanted to personally thank both of you and your team for what they did. Thank you.
Here. Gail?
Gil Yannick, Carson Advisory Board. A question did come up in the reading of not so much this particular issue, but the big fisheries proposal, that the green book that came out. And there was some confusion, and we had a discussion about when you go to a listed water, and there's where it says 5, you can take 5 in possession. And until you consume those 5, you can't take any more. Now and we said that means that particular water. So if you went to body of water A and caught your limit and took them into possession, then you've been to body of water B, which also had a limit of 5, you could take 5 in possession. That means if you could have a total of 10 in possession from 2 different lake bodies, or 5 only regardless. That was the confusion. So it's...
You want Rob to come down, I let Rob interpret that.
You have that many waters?
You want to do this, Rob? Okay. For the record, Mark Warren, yes, you can't be at one water with a limit that exceeds the limit of another water. So if you're fishing in an area and the limit is 5 fish, then that's all you get for the day. And if you go to an area that's 3 fish limit, what I think you're referring to, you can't fish. But conversely, if you started with the 3 fish limit and then went to the 5 fish limit, you could catch 2 fish.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Any other comments? This is the information item here. Okay, we got 2 choices. We can take a little break now, or we can take a short break for lunch. One of the other 2, whatever you want to do. One break for lunch? Okay, let's take, how long do you think we should take? We're close to somewhere to eat, aren't we?
There's cafeteria here, so. Cafeteria.
You want to take an hour or 45? We're going to break for 45 minutes for lunch.